Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya. Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Devim Sarasatim Vyasam. Tato Jayam Udiraye. Today we'll be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, entitled The Lord in the Heart. And today's verse is number 8. Kechit swadehantarhridava kashe.
Kechit swadehantarhridava kashe.
Pradeshamatram purusham vasantam.
Pradeshamatram purusham vasantam.
Chaturbhujam kanja ratangra shankha.
Chaturbhujam kanja ratangra shankha.
Gadadaram Dharanaya Smaranti.
Gadadaram Dharanaya Smaranti.
Here are the word for word meanings. Kechit, others. Swadeha anta, within the body. So this kechit is, in context, there's a progression of descriptions of various types of meditators on the Lord. As we've already read up to this point, there are those who meditate on various aspects of the Lord's form. One of them is the Virata Rupa, which has been mentioned earlier. And this is mentioning now a higher form of meditation, which is to see the form of the Lord within the heart. There are other meditators who meditate on the prana within the heart, but that is not an authorized process because one is not conceiving of the personality of the Lord. Whereas in the Virat Rupa, that is the case. Shukadeva points out that it's the body of the Lord. Albeit an imaginary form, it is a way of meditating on the personality of the Lord. And Kechit, others. So we find this throughout the Shastra, gradations. So this is one of the gradations. Swadeha anta, within the body. Hridaya of Akashe, in the region of the heart. So we're getting something very specific, that the Lord is there within our bodies. And where is he? In the region of the heart. And now, Pradesha Matram is measuring only 8 inches. Purusham, the personality of Godhead. Vasantam, residing. Somebody look up the word reside. Chatubhujam, with 4 hands. Panja, lotus. Rata Anga, the wheel of a chariot. Shankha, conch shell. Gada Dharam, and with a club in the hand. Dharanaya, conceiving in that way. Smaranti, do meditate upon him. Pray tell. Reside, be situated.
Of power or a right.
Of power or a right.
Belong by right to a person or body.
Belong by right or person.
Of equality.
Of equality.
Be present or inherent in some
Be
place.
present or inherent in some place. And where does it come from, please?
Latin.
And
French.
Latin and French. What's the breakdown? Residere.
Back sit.
Back sit.
And then,
Means to sit back in some place.
yes, and then remain.
To remain. Thank you. Translation: others conceive of the personality of Godhead residing within the body, in the region of the heart, and measuring only 8 inches, with 4 hands carrying a lotus, a wheel of a chariot, a conch shell, and a club, respectively. Purport: the all-pervading personality of Godhead resides as Paramatma in the heart of each and every living entity. The measurement of the localized personality of Godhead is estimated to expand from the ring finger to the end of the thumb, more or less 8 inches. The form of the Lord described in this verse with distribution of different symbols, beginning from the lower right hand up and down to the lower left hand, with lotus, wheel of a chariot, conch shell, and club, respectively, is called Janardana, or the plenary portion of the Lord who controls the general mass. There are many other forms of the Lord with varied situations of the symbols of lotus, conch shell, etc., and they are differently known as Purushottama, Achyuta, Narasingha, Trivikrama, Rishikesh, Keshava, Madhava, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Sankarshana, Sridhara, Vasudev, Damodara, Janardana, Narayana, Hari, Padmanabha, Vamana, Madhusudana, Govinda, Krishna, Vishnumurti, Adhoksaja, and Upendra. These 24 forms of the localized personality of Godhead are worshipped in different parts of the planetary system, and in each system there is an incarnation of the Lord having a different Vaikuntha planet in the spiritual sky, which is called the Paravyoma. There are many other hundreds and scores of different forms of the Lord, and each and every one of them has a particular planet in the spiritual sky, of which this material sky is only a fragmental offshoot. The Lord exists as Purusha, or the male enjoyer, although there is no comparing him to any male form in the material world. But all such forms are Advaita, non-different from one another, and each of them is eternally young. The young Lord with 4 hands is nicely decorated as described below. I first offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to His Grace Kalakanta Prabhu, and to all the assembled Vaishnavas. Vanchakalpalibhascha kripasindhave vacha patitanam bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Krishna is responsive to us. In the Bhagavad Gita, he says that however you approach him, then he'll respond accordingly. Yayata ma prapadyante tamstataiva bhajamyaham mama vartmanu vartante manusha partha sarvasha. He says that everyone follows my path because ultimately there is only Krishna. What other path could you follow? Vadanti tattvavidas tattvam yajjanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate. There is one thing. It's advaya gyan tattva. The truth is one. Advaya, not different. But it has variety within it. And that's Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. And as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Sanatana Goswami from the Vishnu Purana, Vishnu Shakti Paraprokta Kshetra Gyakya Tatapara Avidya Karma Sangyangya Tritiya Shakti Rishite. There are 3 general categories of energy of the Lord, of that one Lord. One is the internal potency, the other is the external, and the third is the marginal potency, or the living entity potency of the Lord. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives indication about the hierarchy of importance of the various aspects of the Lord. For instance, in the 18th chapter of the Gita, he says, Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyasya cha shashvatasya shatarmasya sukasya ikantikasya cha. Those who conceive of the Lord as being just the effulgence or the Brahman that they might like to know, that its origin is in Krishna. Krishna says, Brahmanohi pratishtaham. It's resting on me, it comes from me. And then, of course, the verse I quoted earlier from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Vadanti Tattvavidas. These three aspects of the Lord, Bhagavan, is the origin of all of them. And why are there various features of the Lord in the first place? We have the Vedic statement, Eko Bahusham, which means that the one becomes many. But why? There's a desire for enjoyment. Enjoyment comes in variety. Variety means there's more than one. There has to be two for enjoyment. There's the food, and then there's the eater. If there's just food, there's no enjoyment. In fact, our godbrother Sridhar Swami used to say to people when he was talking about this philosophical point, would you like to be a sugar cube, or would you like to taste a sugar cube? The controversy over sugar notwithstanding. And the obvious answer is that you'd like to taste a sugar cube. Obvious, because jivas just want to have fun. As was made famous by Cyndi Lauper. So, Krishna is responsive because we're his parts and parcels, and our function is to give enjoyment to the Lord. When we're connected to him, then we're always connected to him, but when we're consciously connected to him in a mood of worship or appreciation, then there's a loving exchange. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Samoham sarvabhuteshu nami dveshasti na priya ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya mai te teshu chapyaham. This verse has two parts. The first part describes Krishna's relationship with those who are not fully conscious of him. Samoham means that he remains equal, or he responds tit for tat by fulfilling the desires, or as mentioned here, Janardana is the controller of the masses. Krishna's there as the overseer and the permitter within the heart, as he describes himself in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And the relationship is faint, because living entities generally in the material world are unaware of Krishna's presence. And at the same time, Krishna is there within the heart, but what's he doing? He's fulfilling the desires of the living beings. According to their desire, he provides various bodies for them to reside in. There are 8,400,000 rides you can go on here in the material world. That's a lot. Nobody can complain after you've gone on all the rides that there wasn't enough to try it out. But when Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Beach, when a wandering soul was wandering between one tenuous material situation and another, who has no clear idea of his eternal relationship with the Lord, Sanitya Nitya Sambandha Prakritischa Paraivasa, which is described in the Bhagavad Gita, we have an eternal kinship with the Lord. When such a person comes in contact with devotees who have a very specific relationship with the Lord, so specific enough to give description, as we hear in this verse, he's holding various implements in his hands, he's a certain size, and this is foreign to most people. First of all, the idea of God is lost because of the fog of material existence. But that fog starts to clear and one begins to get a specific idea of God when one comes in contact with devotees. And when that happens, then there's something to do in relationship to the Lord. Ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya mai te teshu chapyaham. First part of the verse I mentioned is that the Lord's equal to everyone. He simply responds to their material desires and fulfills them. But when one becomes aware that Krishna is a friend, suhrit, or as Krishna says, bhoktaram yagatapasam, he's the enjoyer of everything, one might think about how difficult it is to give enjoyment to others. People generally are not easy to please, nor are we, but Krishna is easy to please. Bhoktaram yagatapasam, so he's the bhokta. We have somebody that we can please very easily. And Sarvaloka Maheshwara means he owns everything. That's good to know. And he's also the controller of everything. Very helpful. And Suridam Sarvabhutanam, he's also the best friend. That's great news. And when one has these specific ideas of our relationship with Krishna in mind and begins to approach Krishna with a way of offering him things. For instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says something that Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam. You just offer any little thing out of love, and I'll accept it. And when one considers Krishna one's friend, then ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya. Then one starts a life of bhajan. Ye bhajanti. Starts to worship the Lord. Even in a simple way, the smallest of gestures begins this process because one has sambandha gyan, or an understanding that Krishna is there. And then ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya mai te teshu chapyaham. Then Krishna's response is seemingly inordinate because now he's not just samoham, I'm equal, whatever you want, I'll permit it. I'm just offering you whatever you're asking for. But then when the life of bhajan or devotional service begins, one recognizes Krishna's specific features and his preeminence and his personality. Then we emerge as servitors of the Lord, and our lives are completely different. They're life of devotional service. Ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya. And Krishna says, they're in me and I am in them. It becomes a very intimate relationship. And Krishna is famous as vanchatita, which means that he goes out of his way to fulfill the desires of his devotees more than they can imagine. So we can cheer up because the Srishti Lila, the material nature, actually is expanded by the Lord with a desire to reunite with us. And Srishti Stiti Pralaya Sadhana Shakti Reka, all the cycles that are going on in the material world, they're all there so that eventually we can come to devotional service. And since all of you here at Krishna House have come to devotional service, this is a glorious awakening in the sojourn of one's time here in the material world, which one can heartily admit that Krishna is my friend, he's a personality, and there's something to do in relationship to him, which is to serve him very specifically. So now I'll take a few reflections or questions so we can expand the conversation. So work with me, people. Yes? Okay, please. 1, 2.
Prabhu, I read yesterday in the like the first report that Prabhupada wrote for Chaitanya Charitamrita, he analyzes that when we start our bhajan, we should worship, or we want to deepen our basically practice of devotional service. Is that correct? We should worship Govinda, because Govinda means the one who gives pleasure to all the senses. I was just wondering, why that is, and how we could worship Govinda. It's Madan Mohan, Govinda, and Gopi Janavallabha, very different forms of Krishna. So why?
Yeah. First comes Madan Mohan. 18 Thakur Goriyaki Kariyachina Atmasat. 18 Anachanan Vandontini Moranat. The Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they worship these three deities: Madan Mohan, Govindaji, and Gopinath. And so Madan Mohan, because although you didn't ask about Madan Mohan, you asked about Govinda, but we'll go in progression if that's okay. Madan means that which is all attractive to everybody here in the material world, which is the idea of interaction between the two so-called opposites, the yin and the yang. There's a pumsa striya, male and female, and there's a natural attraction between male and female through which living entities have Home Depot and Lowe's. All those wouldn't be there without the attraction, Prabhupada said. He quoted an economist once. It said, without the attraction between male and female, there'd be no Home Depot. I threw that part in. It's the use of, I just watched the pigeons. They're lovey-dovey. I watched two pigeons, male and female, working together to build a little nest, painstakingly picking up little pieces of straw, putting in it for their nest. So that's what makes the whole material world go on, Madan, which is that attraction. But in the material world, says the Bhagavatam, much to the dismay of everyone who reads it at first, that this is a superficial attraction. Although you could say that actually it's real because there is such an attraction in the spiritual world between Radha and Krishna. And that's called the Adiras, the original attraction. But when it gets reflected into the material world, then the kind of pleasure, which is the pinnacle of all pleasure, bliss in the spiritual world, which is Radha and Krishna together, Radha and Madan Mohan. Here in the material world, you get the opposite effect. You get the opposite of what you expected. You don't get happiness, but you get Home Depot with no customer service. So how can one rise above the modes of material nature? Well, people try many ways. One of the main ways people try is by economic development. They try to get enough money so they can retire and say to everybody, ha, I don't have to work. But that doesn't last. As my friend Dave pointed out, who was a paramedic for 20 years, said most people spend most of their life earning money, and then the last part of it, they spend it all on healthcare. Because in America, the way things are set up, if you have money, you don't get any help from the government. And who knows what's going to happen now. But there's a way in which you have to spend everything that you earned throughout your whole life just so you can take care of the ailments at the last moment. Other people, they try to detach themselves from the material world through severe militant restriction of the senses, sitting in cold water in the winter and near hot fire in the summer and so forth, to try to detach themselves from the material body. But this is described in the Bhagavatam, Ariya Krishrena Param Param Tata. It's all hard work for no good reason, because they always slip from that position. The only way that one can rise above the false conception that holds us so tightly here in the material world is by having a higher taste. Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita. Vishaya vinivartante nirahara sedehina rasavarjam rasopyasya. See, we're so close we finish each other's sentences. And that means that when you get a higher taste, really a higher taste, then you're not interested in the lower taste. So the higher taste comes from serving Radha Madan Mohan. Because even Madan, or Cupid in this world, who shoots his little arrow, and then people become smitten and they think, oh, life is beautiful now. And now I'll build a little nest. So that Madan is smitten by Krishna, who's the supreme Cupid. And when one can become attracted to the real Cupid, then one is really safe. When one sees the beautiful eyes of the Lord and becomes attracted, then one is no longer obligated to be a slave in the material world. Kama, dinam, katina, katita, palita, durnidesha, stesham, jata, mayina, karuna, natrapa, no pashanti. Prabhupada quotes this verse. There's a devotee's lament saying, how long have I served the bad masters of these senses? They never gave me time off. They never gave me mercy. And now, no more. Utsrijayanata yarupate samprata labda buddhis. I've gained my intelligence. Now I'm going to worship Krishna. Serve Krishna only. No mas, as Rubuta Duran said to Sugar Ray Leonard. That's it. No mas. I quit. And so one can achieve that position by becoming attracted to Madan Mohan. Then Govindaji. Go means senses. So very practically, Sarvopadi vanir muktan tat pratmena nirmalam rishi kena rishi kesha sevanam bhaktir. There's a way in which the devotional service is defined as using one's senses in the service of the master of the senses. And when we have this, then we have the complete process of self-realization, which includes engaging all the senses in the service of Krishna. When our senses become pleased by serving Govinda, who arguably could be also called the master of the senses, then we become completely satisfied, our senses become purified, and this gives us the opportunity to enter deeply within bhakti proper and be fully engaged. It means all our senses are fully engaged in devotional service. 18 Thakur Gauriyaki Karyachana Atmasa. Therefore, and then of course Gopinath represents the Lord's calling the gopis, which I won't go into the forest to dance in the Rasa Lila. And so the progressively higher levels of understanding of Krishna attained step by step. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for coming and speaking.
This is a great honor to be here, may I say. This is a beacon for the whole world. Thanks for all you're doing all over the world, by the way, and for walking the earth in general.
For
Hare
inspiring
Krishna.
inspiring us all. We began the talk by quoting Bahu Ekasham, that the one becomes many. So can you help us wrap our heads around this? Like, Krishna creates the living entities, and yet there's never a time they did not exist. So create implies that they didn't exist, and then they were created. So how could they be both? Eternally existing and yet created?
Yeah, they're co-eternal, but for giving a device for appreciating our relationship, there's this idea of creating, which means what's our purpose? And that comes to bear for me, or used to, because we don't use a paper anymore for immigration forms, but we used to on airplanes people would hand you a little form you had to fill out before you enter a country. Has anybody gone to a different country and had to fill out an immigration form?
You still have to in India.
Really? Okay. Most places you just stand in front of a little device and it takes a picture of your face and then you walk through. And then you have to show anything anymore. But in India, I still have to. And there's a little box on there that's always vexed me that says occupation. And sometimes I sit there for an hour and I keep thinking, what am I going to put? But this idea of what's the purpose for which the living entities were created, or why do they exist in the first place? They're appreciators. They're appreciators of the Supreme Lord, because what's the use of being a Supreme Lord if you don't have unlimited numbers of appreciators? So I conceived of writing in that box, appreciator. That's my eternal occupation as a soul. So that's the idea, but it's semantics only. The energies of the Lord are delineated clearly in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna talks about Prakriti, Paraprakriti, and the relationship of the soul, Mamaya Vamsha Jiva Loke. He's eternal, but he either struggles with the material nature or he becomes well-situated, better than well-situated. He becomes blissfully situated in his eternal occupation. Anyone else want to try to expand the conversation in a meaningful way by asking a question that is insightful, precisely formed, and yes.
Thank you very much. I was thinking in the line of Prabhupada Thakur said, the example he gave of sugar and sugar cube, and the one who enjoys the sugar cube. The experience of enjoyer, sometimes it's better even to be a sugar cube and to be enjoyed. So in that way, we see variety expands in terms of the bliss of one who enjoys, Krishna being an enjoyer, and us being enjoyed. Would that be correct? That being sugar cube is in a way
Well,
better?
Metaphor, analogy always falls a little bit short. And one way, yes, I would express it like this: king and the king's servant. Which is better? Well, probably the servant, because kings always worry about getting killed and conquered, and they have a lot to lose. For instance, all their stuff. So the servant of the king lives at the same standard that the king does, but has this very high. People have high regard because the person's intimately in connection with the king. But at the same time, the servant can be carefree in the sense of not worrying about being decapitated. So, yes, the position of the servant of Krishna is exalted in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, as being even better than Krishna's position. And that's why Lord Chaitanya came. Because Krishna saw, I'm the supreme enjoyer, but my servants enjoy more than me, 10 million times more. So how is that? Therefore, I'm going to come as the servitor. I, Swayam Bhagavan, the supreme enjoyer, am going to come to enjoy what my devotees are enjoying because they're getting more enjoyment than me. So it's a valid point that you're making. And thank you. Hare Krishna. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So in the beginning of the
Keep
class,
that close. Hold it close.
Okay. In the beginning of the class, you mentioned how we approach Krishna, he approaches us. You know, he's like the intelligence and atheist and other forms of reciprocation. And so, how do we meditate on that without coming into like a transactional mindset? oh, if I approach Krishna this way, like I'll make this.
By having gratitude. Gratitude is a precursor to full-blown bhakti. And when you have gratitude for what Krishna is giving you at every moment, then you can overcome the idea of transactionalism, or you can overcome transactionalism itself. That goes for any interaction with anybody. If you're spoiled and entitled, then it doesn't matter what somebody gives you. You still remain transactional because it's not enough. But in gratitude, which is not artificial, entitlement is artificial, and it's part of the illusion of the material world that we don't have enough. For instance, in the Gita, Krishna talks about atmanyev atmana tushta. If you're self-situated and you understand who you are, then tushta, you'll be satisfied. And you'll, from that satisfaction, it's easy to feel gratitude. Gratitude is this overwhelming feeling of enough. I have enough. And besides that, just another point about gratitude, which is that it has to be personal. There is no such thing as gratitude without personal intent. Because, just an example, if somebody drops outside your Whole Foods, do you have here? You have Whole Foods?
Yeah.
All right. So, if somebody drops $100 unknowingly, and you pick it up and walk away, you can't have gratitude for that person. You may say it, but it's cynical actually, because you stole it. However, if that person notices you and for some reason feels inclined, whatever that may inspire that feeling, and gives you the $100 intentionally, then you can feel gratitude. Trace that back. People all the time, it's a Krishna in the Bhagavata says, Jnana yagnina chapyanye yajanto mam upasite ekatmena ritatmena bahuda vishutomukam. There are various levels at which people view Krishna. They see him as the demigods, they see him as the universe, they see themselves as God, and they worship themselves, and so forth. He's saying here, if you've ever heard, at least we hear it in California, people say, I asked the universe for a car. Even mint green I wanted, and the universe gave me a mint green Prius, or whatever. So there's this little sense of, there's some personal touch there. Otherwise, there can't be gratitude. So if you cultivate gratitude, like Prabhupada talks about this in the Rasoham Apsukonteya, when you drink water, he said the devotees have gratitude for the Lord for giving such an amazing beverage, water, to quench one's thirst. And in that, there's this personal connection, because it's intentional by the Lord. He provided something nice for us. So have gratitude. And there's no limit on how much gratitude you can have. You can have so much gratitude that you can't fall asleep at night. That's possible. Your chest could fill up with so much gratitude for instance, a devotee. You think about a devotee, like how wonderful this devotee is, and it's possible to become so consumed by that you wouldn't be able to fall asleep at night. Imagine what a life that is. And imagine expanding that for everything that you see everywhere, all the time. And imagine how that leads back to the originator of everything, who's Krishna, who's intentionally making arrangements for us at every moment, who's supplying our life. Atmanam akilatmanam. He's the soul of our soul. And anyway, we could go on forever. We have 4 minutes. So, yes, Prabhu, please.
You just reminded Srila Prabhupada said, of all his disciples, he mentioned Jamuna as the one on the stage of Baba. And somebody asked me to describe Jamuna the other day, and I was struggling. You just described her perfectly. She was just filled with gratitude constantly. Everything, every moment. It was amazing. Thank you.
Wow, that's good to know. I'll add that to my repertoire. Yeah, it's amazing to know Prabhupada's feelings for various devotees. I was reading about Jayananda the other day. Prabhupada elevated him to well, he had elevated himself to sainthood, but Prabhupada recognized him in that level. Yeah, thank you. Okay, last chance. Yes.
Sorry, just a follow-up.
This is the part where, because we end at 1:30, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm going to answer questions in 30 seconds or less.
Okay.
This is the lightning round. Okay, so make your question brief.
Okay. So I was just wondering, you talked about being self-realized and like self-satisfied and the gratitude that comes. How do you balance that with like the lobe feeling? Because I don't know if I have the right conception of what the lobe feeling is. Because if we're self-satisfied, then are we greedy for service?
That's the paradox of gratitude and love for Krishna, that because Krishna is unlimited, the lobha is for serving Krishna. It's not for oneself feeling more satisfied. And when one realizes one's relationship as a servitor, and that Krishna's the soul of my soul, imagine how much you want to serve yourself. I don't have to imagine, I know how much I want to serve myself unlimitedly. So when you realize, when you see reality that actually Krishna, I'm part of Krishna, and the more I serve him, the more I'm edified myself. Then we develop this type of greed that I want to serve every minute with all of my senses. And there's not enough time in one day to serve Krishna. And that can keep you up at night too. Okay, you had a question. Remember, it's the 30-second round.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for sharing about gratitude. And one of the obstacles in the gratitude, like initially the gratitude feeling is higher when the devotee is progressing in the early stage. But as we heard that the gratitude reaches content, and then the gratitude also may kind of go down, and one may start to kind of take things easily, whether it's the deities or the process of bhakti. How can we continuously ensure, as in spiritual world, they say that the gratitude and the service is always like increasing, but sometimes it's observed personally or others, like that gratitude may kind of...
We got that. You finished your 30 seconds. So you have to reinvent yourself every day. And progress, also, don't become disappointed, because progress comes in a series of comebacks. You have to be the comeback kid. Because even during one round of Japa, you may have to make 10 comebacks. And what to speak of, in a lifetime of devotional service. You have to reinvent yourself, start over, make comebacks constantly. And be willing to do that. And that's the way to put together one whole lifetime in which you're on an upward trajectory. And as Prabhupada writes in the light of the Bhagavata, missteps may not be detrimental. They may become the pillars to success if we approach with the right attitude. And be humble, and also appreciate devotees who have good qualities. As Voltaire once said, when you appreciate the good qualities in others, they become yours. If you're envious of others, you don't get anything. You void the possibility for attaining good qualities in this life. So worship devotees. Wherever you see somebody who's more enthusiastic than you, serve that person or appreciate them deeply. And if you keep doing that, especially devotees, because that's our main source of advancement, is the association of devotees. Find devotees, and it doesn't just mean that there's only one person, there's only Jesus, there's only Muhammad, there's only Prabhupada. Prabhupada is reflected within everyone. In fact, it might be the new person. Lord Chaitanya did this, and I know I'm over 30 seconds, but I just thought of this. In the Jagannath temple, at the Garuda Stamba, he was beholding the beautiful lotus eyes of Lord Jagannath. And a Orisen woman came in and climbed up on Lord's shoulders, one foot on the Garuda Stamba and one foot on the Lord's shoulder, so she could look. She was oblivious to the fact that anybody was standing there because she was so eager to see, there's your lobe, eager to see the Lord. And then when Govinda, his servant, saw her climb up there, he said, get down, get down, get down, get down, get down, what are you doing? And Mahaprabhu then became aware of what was happening, and he chastised Govinda, not the woman. He said, what are you, an uncivilized person? He said to his servant, he said, don't you recognize the enthusiasm that she has? I wish I had that. So we should see that in everyone. That's why Sankirtan is a beautiful thing, and the preaching you're doing here is beautiful, because isn't it when you bring new people into Krishna consciousness, vicariously you experience what you experienced the first time. How many times I ask people, what's the first time you actually heard the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra where your brain exploded and you're like, oh my God, I got to become a Hare Krishna. Then when was that? And it go back to that, and you go back to it through the people who you bring into Krishna consciousness, and you see them singing down the hallway, and goes, yeah, right, it's a simple thing. Just go back to the basics again and again, and have gratitude for everything you get. Thank you very much for inviting us to your famous, world famous temple, universally famous temple with process of hearing, chanting, remembering Krishna, and a means to give everyone opportunity to be fully engaged in Krishna's service. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Lakshmana Shringadev, Shri Shri Gauritai, all the great acharyas, if you so desire, please give unlimited resources to Krishna House and Krishna Lunch and all the projects that Kalakanta Prabhu is doing all over the world so that he can expand it unlimitedly. Thank you for considering our request. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Vancha kalpatarishcha kripa snadeva cha patitanam bhavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.